I have noticed recently that the nibs of my pens get out of alignment more frequently than I would think is typical for most users. Read after 2 or 3 sessions with any of my pens. That's a lot. I mean, that's not many. Whatever. That's coming out of alignment pretty often. I notice it happens faster with broader nibs and stubs than finer ones. Is this an issue of writing pressure, or of pen angle to the paper? I think this is going to be more of an issue with writing pressure. The pen angle, maybe not so much. The rotation, perhaps. But really, I think the writing pressure is your issue here, Taylor. So what's happening, if your nib is getting out of alignment, which I'm assuming when you say out of alignment, you mean that one tine is getting pushed up too high and it's writing scratchy. That's what I think of when I hear out of alignment. I don't think of it being a break in flow or anything like that. Out of alignment means that the 2 nib tines are not lined up anymore. So when that's happening, typically it's because you are writing with more pressure on one tine than you are on another. So really the solution for this, other than fixing it to making sure that it's writing properly in the first place, is just to lighten up. Lighten up on your writing pressure. I don't know how new you are to fountain pens, but this is something I typically see kind of a lot from people that haven't had a lot of experience with fountain pens. When you've written for years, decades maybe, with ballpoint and rollerball pens, you're used to like bearing down on that thing and having to write really hard. Particularly if you come over to fountain pens and you don't really know what nib size is ideal for you, and you are using a nib size that's a little finer than what you would actually prefer, and you have a tendency to write with more pressure to try to get that fatter line, or to get that, or it can be a consequence of the ink as well. If you are writing and you would really rather have a darker, more saturated ink than what you are actually using, you can have a tendency to bear down too much on it to try to put more ink down. It might even be subconscious too, honestly. So think about that. When you're writing with the pen, literally, you should be holding the pen, but not pressing down with the pen with any pressure whatsoever, just enough to control it. The fountain pen, properly tuned fountain pen, should be able to just write under its own weight. You should be able to hold the back of the pen, and as long as you're holding it in the right rotation and generally in the right angle, you should be able to, I'm using my arm, I don't know why, but you should be able to take and just drag it on the page like this and have it draw a line. That's when you know it's tuned well, and you don't need to write with any pressure to be able to get it to write. So I would check your nib size to make sure that under that writing pressure that you are happy with the line width, and that's good. Also make sure you're happy with the degree of saturation and the color of the ink. If all that looks good under just that light of pressure, then I would try to train yourself to write with less pressure, because I think that's probably what is going on. And the reason it's getting thrown out of alignment is because you're probably rotating it in your hand a little bit to one side or the other. You didn't say which way it was getting out of alignment, but especially if it's happening with stubs. Stubs are a little more sensitive to rotation in your hand, as are broads. So they can get thrown out of alignment easier, because if you think about it, it's a larger surface area with the nib, you know, so if you got this little tiny fine nib, if it's over rotated a little bit, it's not going to get too far out of whack. But you have this stub that's like really wide. If it's over rotated a little bit, it's going to be seriously out of whack, more so than it would be with a finer nib. So I think that's all the things that I have here from you. I think that's what it's pointing to. So try to observe as you're writing, you know, to really see if you are naturally rotating it in one direction or the other. And I think honestly most people have a tendency, if you're right-handed, you have a tendency to rotate it to the right as you're writing, and so you're going to put more pressure on the right tine, and so you're going to end up with the left tine a little bit lower than the right one. That's where most people have a tendency to do it, and so it's going to feel scratchy going from left to right. So I'm just going to take a guess here that that's maybe what you're dealing with, and you're having to bend that right tine back down because you're probably over-rotating it a little bit, and then you're writing with too much pressure. And if you're over-rotating and it's not writing properly because of the rotation, you're then going to compensate with more pressure, and therefore it's going to get thrown out of alignment. So I think if you can address those things, these are all things you can relatively self-diagnose, but take everything I've said here, try that, and see if that works any better for you. And I'm willing to bet that it will.